Okay, we have another question here in our review to some trig problems. We have cosine x over 1 minus cosine x over 1 plus cosine x equals to cotangent square, and they need to prove the same way. So we work on left side and make it equal to right side. So let's do that here. Multiply the two denominators, 1 minus cosine times 1 plus cosine x, and then we're gonna multiply, so cosine x will be multiplied times 1 and times cosine x, so it would be cosine x times 1 is cosine x plus cosine times cosine is cosine squared. And here is, we will multiply negative, be careful, negative cosine times 1 minus cosine. Negative cosine times 1 is negative cosine x. Negative cosine times negative cosine is positive cosine square. So in our numerator, we see that we could cancel out cosine with negative cosine. Then cosine square and cosine square is 2 cosine square divided by, multiply 1 minus cosine times 1 plus cosine. 1 times 1 is 1, minus cosine times cosine is cosine square. And as we know from before that 1 minus cosine square is, sine square. So this will be sine square of x. And here is at the top, we have 2 cosine square. So you see here, numerator cosine square of x, denominator is sine square of x. If we combine cosine square over sine square equals what? Cotangent square. So it will be cotangent square of x, and we have 2. So as you see that left equals right. Left equals right. You're going to say left equals right. We have another problem here. Solve over the period from 0 to 2 pi. Find all solutions. Sine x plus cosine x equals 2 square root of 2 sine x cosine x. We have left side sine x plus cosine x. If you see that, my advice to you is to square both sides. Why? Because in the future, we're going to see sine square plus cosine square, which is equal to 1. So we square both sides. So that's plan here. Square left side, so sine x plus cosine x. We square it, equals. And here we have 2 square root of 2 sine x cosine x. We're going to square. For left side, we have sine x square is 1. Not yet, just sine square. And cosine is square. So square first, square second, plus 2 times first times second. 2 sine cosine. And as we know that sine square plus cosine square equals 1. So we will replace 1 for sine square plus cosine square. And we copy 2 sine x cosine x. So we work a little bit on left side. Okay. So we keep it for now, and let's see what's right side will be. Square right side. So square 2 square root of 2. Let's do it here. 2 square root of 2, square it. When we square 2 will be 4, and when we square radical 2 will be 2. 2 times 4 is 8. And square sine x will be sine x square. And we square cosine, it will be cosine square of x. So you see that we have 1 plus 2 sine x cosine x equals 8 sine square cosine square. Looks like for you it's complicated, but I see that it's no, it's not complicated at all. Look, if you want to solve the equation, just plan to make it for 0. So what we could do here is to subtract 8 sine square, move it to the other side. Move it to the other side. Subtract 8 sine square cosine square. So this right side will be cancelled out and 0 left. That's right side. So right side will be 0. And left side, we'll try to organize it here. It will be 1 plus 2 sine x cosine x. And here is negative 8 sine x. I will do it like that, sine x cosine x square. Why not? Yeah, this is a square and this is a square here. Let's remind you by factoring trinomial. If you remember, factor trinomial. So you see, if you remember before, 1 plus 2x minus 8x squared, and we could factor it. Okay, don't look at the complicated trigonometrical stuff here. So just assume that this is x or L or M. So we'll do that here. So 2 parentheses, change color, purple. Here, go for purple. Yeah. 2 parentheses equal to 0. So 1 is 1 times 1. And we're going to factor negative 8, let's say x squared. Negative 8. It could be 2 times 4. It should be 2 times 4 because the difference between 2 and 4 is 2. So 2 of that thing, sine x cosine x, times 4. 2 sine x cosine x. And here's 4 sine x cosine x. Which one is negative? Which one is positive? We must have the greatest value positive. So 1 times 4 must be positive, and 1 times 2 must be negative, because if you combine positive 4 and positive 2 will give us and negative 2, it will give us positive 2. So this is must be positive, and this is negative. Okay, so 1 minus 2 sine x cosine x could be equal 0. 1 minus 2 sine x cosine x equals 0. Or we have 1 plus 4 sine x cosine x equals 0. So we have 2 solutions for that here. If we subtract 1 then and divide by negative 2, then sine x cosine x equals, subtract 1 will be negative 1 over negative 2, which is a half. And if you subtract 1 here and you divide by 4, then sine x cosine x equals negative 4th. 2 solutions here. -4. So sine x cosine x equals a half, and sine x cosine x equals -1/4. If you look at the two possible solutions, sine x equals one half sine x cosine x, and also sine x cosine x equals -1/4. Did that mean it is possible that cosine x equals a half and sine x equals 1? Yeah. And here is it's possible to have cosine x equals -1/2 and sine x equals a half, or we switch. So you have many possible solutions. You could say sine x could be a half and cosine x equals 1, or switch. And here is sine x could be a half and cosine x equals -1/2, because a half times -1/2 is -4. Then we could look at the angle that its sine is a half. We have 30 degrees. Change the color. Or sine is positive in second, it could be 150. Yeah. So we have pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6. Cosine 90 is 1. Sine 0 is 0, and cosine 0 is 1. So x is 0. And here, sine x equals a half, so we have the same solution. So pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6. And here is cosine x equals -1/2. So we're going to look at the angle that we learned to do that. X equals r cosine a half. By the way, you could apply to all. So cosine of 60 is a half, but we're looking for the negative cosine. Negative cosine where cosine is negative in second and third, because you know all are positive. Sine is positive, tangent is positive, and here is cosine is positive. So cosine is negative in two locations, in second quadrant and in third quadrant. If you have 60 here, then it would be 180 minus 60, which is 120. And if you have 60 here, it would be 180 plus 60, which is 240. So possible solution for that, 120 means pi over 3 and multiplied by 2 pi over 3. And this is pi over 3, which is 60 times 4 to give us 240. So that's the possible solutions for this question. And don't forget, when we have sine and cosine too, we have to edit 2 pi k in each, 2 pi k, 2 pi k, 2 pi k.